Hi again, everyone. Patrick Fingston here. I write the Illinoize political newsletter, which you can read every day at theillinoize.com. That's ILLINOIZE. Thanks again for joining us on our almost, sort of, kind of not exactly weekly podcast. Great show for you today. A lot to talk about with huge changes on the national political scene, but they certainly involve Illinois as well. With President Biden withdrawing from the presidential race over the weekend. Governor Pritzker, of course, has been eyed as someone who might have wanted to run for president if Biden stepped aside. Of course, the wagon circled for Vice President Harris, and the governor endorsed the vice president Monday morning. Then the speculation immediately kicked in. Will JB Pritzker be considered for vice president? Does he want to be vice president? How does that all shake out? So we're going to talk a lot about that today, a lot about the Democratic National Convention as well. We'll be joined by Rick Pearson, the great political reporter for the Chicago Tribune. We'll also talk to Alderman Viegas from the Chicago City Council, who was elected a Biden delegate. Will support Vice President Harris for the presidency. So we'll talk to Alderman Viegas and get his perspective as someone who's kind of on the inside of the Democratic establishment and someone who has a keen eye on what's going on with the DNC here in about a month. So just to maybe rehash kind of where we're at on this vice presidential search situation and how it impacts Governor Pritzker. So he came out Monday morning. We're recording this on Wednesday afternoon. He came out Monday morning, endorsed Vice President Harris for president. His endorser has done some TV hits, which we'll share a clip of that here in a little bit, where he's fully endorsing her, kind of doing the non-denial denial when he gets the question about running for vice president. He has not been seen publicly in the state since Sunday, so he hasn't taken any questions from Illinois reporters in that time. So we don't specifically know, at least not from the horse's mouth, what he's really thinking. What we reported on Tuesday, and you can go read the story on theillinoize.com, is that John Cullerton, who's the former Senate president, he's on the Democratic National Committee, he's on the Democratic State Central Committee, knows Pritzker well, is an incredibly connected Democrat. He told us that his pollster that he used while he was Senate president is Biden's pollster, and that he's known for quite some time that the numbers were stacked against Biden, and that Biden was likely going to be out of the race at some point. So take that position for what it's worth. Maybe it's a little bit of, hey, look at what I know, but that's his position. And he told us that he discussed being Kamala Harris's vice president with Governor Pritzker before this ever happened over the weekend. And he told us that Governor Pritzker was very interested in serving as vice president, that he brings a lot to the table, that he could work with the vice president, the current vice president as VP, and that it's something that he'd want to do. Obviously, it positions him as somebody who could run for president in either 4 years or 8 years. So there's clearly an interest there. We know he's interested. So what's the pro and con here? Well, obviously, a guy like JB Pritzker is somebody who has a lot of power, billionaire, executive, governor. Not a lot of people in his life tell him no. You immediately become second fiddle when you're vice president. So do you really want to be second chair? Or do you want to continue to run your own little kingdom and then take a run when the time is right? Positively, though, there are things that he could theoretically get done. He's got a record, he's got connections, he's got influence. If the vice president says, Governor, I want you to come in and do X, Y, Z, theoretically he could do it. And that could maybe be an issue for him that he could make positive change. So I'm interested to see what the governor will say. We're not hearing that he's being vetted officially, at least. There was a Wall Street Journal report Monday night that he had been asked for vetting materials. Pritzker denied that Tuesday morning when he was on Morning Joe on MSNBC, which it kind of seems like is the audition space for these vice presidential hopefuls. So we'll have to see how this shakes out for Pritzker, but he's certainly interested. So I want to dig more into that though, and that's why we'll bring in Rick Pearson from the Chicago Tribune. All right, so let's talk more about the governor and the possibility of running for vice president, and maybe why he didn't pull the trigger on running for president. We are pleased to welcome Rick Pearson, great political reporter for the Chicago Tribune. Rick's as plugged in as anyone can be at this point, especially even though the governor's kind of got things locked down in the last few days. Let's start here, Rick, from your reporting. Everybody knew, Pritzker knew that this was coming at some point. His poll numbers were in terrible shape. He had dug in, but this seemed inevitable that he was leaving. What was Pritzker's approach?
I'm not so sure everybody thought that this was inevitable. I mean, this decision on a Sunday afternoon, there were already plans for the following week for campaign appearances for Biden. And yeah, there did seem to be maybe an inevitability for this. But I'm not sure anybody really knew in the end that Biden was going to drop out. So it's been a lot of people, not just Pritzker, kind of very carefully walking this tightrope of, rah, rah, go team. But at the same time, hey, I'm over here, I'm available. Let's put in a reliever and let's see if we can't reset the ball game.
But even Pritzker's public statements in the last couple of weeks have become less definitive, before Biden dropped out. I mean, it was I'm all in for Joe, and then it was, well, he's the nominee now. I mean,
right, he's the nominee.
It certainly seemed this was bad.
He knew it was bad. I won't deny that. I just think I'm just not sure that he believed that it was inevitable that he would drop out. I don't think anybody really knew, and I don't think anybody could be sure that he would do it. I mean, he has been very forthright up until, dropping this announcement on Sunday, and it stunned everybody, including members of his own staff.
Mm-hmm. So I had heard that, who Pritzker may have been meeting with and talking to on Sunday after the announcement came, he waited to endorse Vice President Harris until Monday. By then, the wagons had been circled. Right. I mean, it was inevitable, seemingly, that it was going to be Harris. Was he waiting to see how it played out? Was he trying to make a play in the background? What do you understand here?
I think he was waiting to see how it played out, certainly. And, if you remember, it was kind of with Biden on Sunday, it was a two-step process. As one, I'm not running again. And then two, I'm backing Kamala Harris, my vice president. But I think for Pritzker, it was more of a let's wait and see how things shake out. Now, given even if Biden hadn't backed Kamala Harris, it still would have been a tremendous hurdle to try to leapfrog her, with being the nation's first Black female vice president, first South Asian female vice president. For optics looks, that would have been very, very hard for him to try to ladder climb over her. But certainly after Biden weighed in with his support, I do think it did catch a lot of people by surprise just how quickly that the party coalesced behind her. And I think that was part of kind of the wait and see. But certainly, in merely a matter of hours after that announcement, it was pretty clear that she was going to be the presumptive replacement nominee.
So by Monday morning, he's endorsed Harris. He was kind of the last big hurdle to fall. I don't know exactly when Newsom got out, but it really didn't look like he was
Right.
He was going to make a serious charge anyway. Bashir kind of waited until Monday too, but he was more in the Veep stakes anyway. So the attention then immediately turns to Vice President. We had reporting this week that the former Senate President John Cullerton has talked to Pritzker about Vice President before Biden stepped away and said he was very interested if this sort of thing happened. The governor has not talked to Illinois media since this happened. He did do a couple of hits on cable news this week where he kind of did the non-denial denial. Let's take a look at those real quick.
Have you received any vetting materials from her campaign about possibly being her running mate?
No.
And if you do, would you be interested in the job?
Look, I love being the governor of the state of Illinois, and I've been out on the campaign trail fighting hard for Democrats to win. I was in Indiana and Ohio last week. I'm going to be in Tennessee and Arizona. I, as you know, started an organization called Think Big America that's fighting for reproductive rights. We did it in Ohio. We're doing it in Arizona, in Nevada. It's important to me that we win across the board and all across the United States. So I'm going to continue to do that. And I'm very interested in making sure that Kamala Harris becomes the next president of the United States.
You are a possible VP pick, and that is very clear. So let me just put the question to you this way. If you were asked to be on the ticket with Harris, would you say yes?
Look, I'm going to work my heart out for this ticket. I really believe in the values that Democrats are putting forward. Obviously, you'd have to consider it if you're asked, but I have said, and I really believe that, the people of Illinois elected me. There's an awful lot that I can get done here in the state of Illinois, and over the next 100 days, make sure that we're making the case for Kamala Harris and winning in November. It's vital because Donald Trump will be dangerous for America.
So he seems interested, right?
Oh, he's interested. And there's no doubt about the fact that he's interested. And, politics can so often be a matter of timing. And, this was a unique, shining moment of timing for any number of Democratic politicians, all of whom have pretty healthy egos, to jump into this and try to posture themselves as the best contender here. We still, as much as that early Morning Joe broadcast where he said he hadn't received vetting materials yet, we haven't heard otherwise at all, even though his name has been floating on various lists of various publications as being someone who is being vetted for it. And we're kind of in this speculatory stage about who is the, who fits the better dynamics here to be a running mate for Kamala Harris. And there's a lot of people to choose from.
Here's the thing that I can't quite put my finger on, and maybe you have a better perspective of the governor. His people don't particularly talk to me very much, and he's obviously very guarded. They at least talk to you more than they talk to me, which may say something. But he clearly has an ego, right? Every politician has an ego. That's not a shot.
And I didn't mean it to be one.
No. I preface that every time I say it because some people say, "Well, you think he's egotistical," and it's not necessarily true because politicians think they can fix things. That's part of the allure to public service for them. But not only does he have that politician's ego, there's also this business executive billionaire background that most normal run-of-the-mill politicians don't have. Would he be comfortable being number two to somebody that, and I don't think he considers the vice president a lightweight by any means, but somebody he certainly puts his qualifications right up there with?
Well, I will tell you, I think, one, that's a question that the Harris camp has been asking. I firmly believe that when you're talking about, a team player. Now, Pritzker has always been, as far as the Democrat at large, a team player. But yes, with the politician ego, with the business ego of getting what I want, there's also the possibility too is play the long game. And if Harris wins, she wins 2 terms. What's 8 years down the road? You also have the fact that what if Harris doesn't win? I'm on this ticket. Is that a positive or a negative? I mean, you could argue both ways. I think, in some respects, it would be a positive because despite here we are, Illinois and Pritzker doing much to try to improve his national footprint, is still somebody who's really not very well known around the country. At the same time, if you're part of a failed ticket for the White House and you're the number 2, it takes a lot of work to try to resuscitate things to become a future number 1.
Mm-hmm. And if a Harris and an Andy Beshear lose in November to Donald Trump, which of course is going to be a real negative for in Democratic eyes, he can almost position himself on November 6th as the guy in 2028. I mean, he can camp out in swing states, use his super PAC, be on MSNBC every day. Essentially, he can almost be the candidate in waiting if they lose, right?
Absolutely. And the other thing too is that you find yourself in a much better position of advancing by being in office and having that platform to speak from. Although, of course, you've got to deal with the problems that come every day with government, but still you have that platform of being an elected official versus, being outside of government and trying to look your way back into an elected position.
What would he want to be as a vice president? I mean, the current vice president didn't have much of a portfolio. I mean, the border czar thing that Republicans are gonna zero in on hasn't been a serious policy portfolio for her anyway. So Biden was the senior ear in the senior advisor essentially in the Oval Office for President Obama. Mike Pence was completely ignored by Donald Trump. You've had some vice presidents with influence, other vice presidents with no influence. I certainly don't think he'd want to go to Washington and for a job that's less useful than a warm bucket of what, as was it John Nance Gardner? John Nance Gardner said.
Yes. Well, and I mean, I would think that he would want to be put in a position of being some kind of a management authority. I mean, when you look at Biden serving under Obama, part of Biden's role was to try to be that person that could go across the aisle and use his Senate experience, his long legislative experience. And he and
McConnell avoided some shutdowns. I mean, they had that relationship and Biden's experience in the Senate that really they got some things done together.
Right. Now, in this kind of a structure, it's, play to the strength. And what is the strength? I can't say that necessarily crossing the aisle is a Pritzker's strength here. He doesn't, know really anybody across the aisle. And we also don't know, what if he were to actually be the vice president and Harris wins, what's the makeup of the Congress and what are they going to be doing? I could just see him more in kind of a management style role, almost like regardless of the politics, of just working on some of the almost like office management and budget would probably, I think, be a top role for him to be looking just at the structure and workings of government and how to make that more effective.
How does this change the outlook for the DNC in a month? We hadn't heard a speaking lineup, so we didn't really know if Pritzker was on it anyway. We figured he'd be somewhere, maybe a keynote, maybe not. how does this change the planning for the DNC in Chicago? How does this, I have a friend who works on the convention staff, and it's essentially just been insane for them, as you can imagine. How has this all changed in the last few days?
Well, it's almost like the what's facing Kamala Harris and putting together a presidential campaign rather than being the running mate, kind of attaching to the Biden apparatus. I mean, this whole convention was built as a showcase for Joe Biden, and that's how it's been planned ever since Chicago was chosen. So all you had, months of programming, because they are TV shows. You've had months of programming being done to make that the central point, and now you're basically being told just before the season premiere that the show's being scrapped because the star is no longer willing to appear, and we've got to make the second banana the star of the show. So the production efforts have to be running at a frenetic pace here. And while you will see and frequently in the statements by the convention folks that, our mission to showcase the achievements of the Biden and Harris administration have not changed. And that's certainly true, but you can't do it in that same vein with a person in the new lead role.
The good news for them, though, in this situation is the second banana can at least get a sentence out, with a subject, verb, and a period, which is
and
be a benefit, right?
And I do think if there is a change, it probably breathes a whole lot of new life into this convention. I mean, I can tell you that I think there were a lot of people who, yes, this was going to be the first Democratic convention like the Republicans since COVID, with people, in-house and all of that. But, you get energy from the stage and who's on the stage. And Joe Biden is not a high energy guy. And I think after obviously from the debate performance and everything that led up to this has been kind of a doldrums time for Democrats when it comes to energy levels. And I do think now, for Democrats who are kind of looking with a negative outlook of their fate for November, that this gives them that optimism that had been missing for so long.
What's the level of concern among Democrats or the convention, city, state, whoever it may be? Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, has sort of promised that he's going to ship more migrants. Of course, migrants different than illegal immigrants, people who are in the country legally, from Texas to Chicago, potentially. Rumors of 25,000 that could be sent here. I think that's excessive, but certainly it seems like there's going to be an effort to kind of throw a monkey wrench into things, right?
Oh, certainly. I mean, there's going to be every effort that Republicans are going to try for counter programming on this, and certainly that would be one of them. And to mock Chicago as a sanctuary city, I do think that the numbers of 25,000 are excessive. But it's not just, Republicans trying to do the counter programming. You still have issues involving the protests involving Israel and Gaza. There's still trying to figure out what's the acceptable parade route for the protests and those kinds of things. But I've been suggesting to people that don't be focused on designated parade routes and everything else, that there's going to be protests all over the city. And while there weren't that many sizable events, protests in Milwaukee, Chicago will have a number of them, and they could be happening just about anywhere in the city, not just in the designated zones.
Last thing for you, Rick. This is hypothetical completely, but this is a state-focused publication, so I feel like I have to talk about the state government angle here. If JB Pritzker is elected vice president or goes to the cabinet or whatever it may be, you end up with Governor Juliana Stratton, who's a one-term state representative who hasn't had much of a portfolio, or at least not a significant portfolio, as lieutenant governor. She would have an impending free-for-all for a Democratic primary for governor in 2026, a legislature that is, John Boehner once called a House Republican majority 218 frogs in a wheelbarrow. Chris Welch has to be feeling that way right now with his giant majority and how well it's split. Just how difficult will it be for Democrats in Springfield without JB Pritzker?
Well, one is you can't discount Pritzker's money as part of the influence that he's held over Democrats. And if that dries up, that creates a whole other set of questions. I mean, I would presume if Pritzker were to advance, that Juliana Stratton would be his preference. It was his pick. This was not the old days where they ran separately. This was his pick. And when you have that pick, that does represent a question of who you believe ought to, one, be able to do the job, and two, be the successor. And so here again, any potential challengers, and there would be many, but would still kind of almost face that hurdle of and challenges in a Democratic Party where race is always a major factor of taking on a African-American woman who, is the first Black lieutenant governor in the state's history.
She's no Scott Lee Cohen, that's for sure.
No one is.
Rick Pearson from the Chicago Tribune. My friend, thanks so much as always, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Thanks to Rick Pearson for his time and his thoughts. We really appreciate his reporting as always. Wanted to get a more inside look too, as well from the city. So we talked Tuesday, as we're recording this Wednesday, putting it out on Thursday. We talked to Chicago Alderman Gilbert Villegas, who is a DNC delegate, was elected for Biden, and got his thoughts on Pritzker and on the DNC and some of the status of things in the city of Chicago. All right, we are pleased to welcome Chicago Alderman Gil Villegas to the show. He represents the 36th ward. He's an elected delegate to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago here in about a month. Was a Biden delegate. I guess you've been released, so we can talk about that, Alderman. Let me just start. From the perspective of a Democrat, how has the whole world changed in your mind, in your eyes, the last few days, going from so bleak with where the Biden campaign was to essentially the new energy you all seem to have with Kamala Harris as the likely nominee?
Yeah, I would say that there's been a lot of energy in the last 48 hours. But, before Biden decided to not run, one of the things that we've been not good at is talking about the accomplishments that the president has done over his 3.5 years, whether it's the bipartisan infrastructure bill, whether it's the CHIPS Act, bringing local manufacturing back to the United States, whether it's the PACT Act for veterans, the Inflation Reduction Act, capping insulin at $35. I mean, these are huge policy wins that this president was able to accomplish in 3.5 years. And so the main issue that we've had as Democrats is touting the accomplishments. And so that was one of the frustrations, is that the president wasn't able to get this information out, and that they were continuing to highlight the fact that he was an elder statesman and focusing on his age. And now that he's decided not to run for the betterment of the party, but more importantly for the country, now Kamala Harris being the she'll be the
presumptive is safe to say, right?
Yeah, presumptive nominee. I feel that there's a lot of energy, and you can just take a look at just some of the calls that were put together, where you had 45,000 African-American women get on a call to talk about how they want to help Kamala Harris, followed by the next night of another 30,000 African-American men that want to help Kamala. And then now future talking about Latinos, white women. I mean, there's a whole sense of energy now about making sure that Kamala Harris is successful in 2024.
You're certainly not anyone that would ever be considered like a Biden hater, right? I mean, you were a Biden delegate. I mean, you signed up for it. So like when did you have concerns that all right, this is bad, we can't win? Was it the debate? Was it before that? Was it after that? When did the doubt really hit you?
Well, so you're 100% right. I'm not a Biden hater. I wouldn't have run as a delegate if I did not think that the president was very successful with his accomplishments. We had some concerns. I had some concerns during the debate and then the subsequent debates. Subsequent interviews where I thought he wasn't as sharp as he was in 2020. But I think that I still thought that we still had a path if we were able to articulate the accomplishments as well as just putting a comparison between what Trump did under his tenure, what Biden did under his tenure. That was the good thing, that both candidates had a record to run on. Our job as Democrats was just, we were not highlighting the accomplishments and the monumental legislation that he was able to push through in the 3.5 years. So I had some doubt, just like everybody else. But the reality is that I thought if President Biden were to stay in the race, that he still had a path, but it was just going to be a little bit more difficult. Now that he's decided to step out and endorse Kamala Harris for president, I think that we have a greater sense that we'll be victorious in November.
I think that brings us to Vice President. I think that brings us to Governor Pritzker and his role in this whole thing. We reported Tuesday morning that the former Senate President John Cullerton, who knows the governor well, who's on the DNC, who's on the State Central Committee, says that he's previously discussed VP with the governor and that the governor is, quote, very interested. The campaign hasn't confirmed or denied those conversations or anything like that. Do you think the governor should be interested at least, or should pursue the office? And what do you think he would bring to it?
Well, I'm a big fan of our governor. If you take a look at his track record and what he's been able to accomplish under his tenure, 6 balanced budgets, 9 credit upgrades, infrastructure bill, $45 million capital bill, funding for public education. One of the things that I'm excited about, recent quantum technology, half a billion for that type of technology, having that foresight to make these investments. I would love to see him on a ticket, and then I don't want to lose him. So it's a tough scenario, but I think what he brings to the table is great connections across the country. And he also brings a proven track record of accomplishments and his relationships and his family's relationships on the Hill, with his sister being a former commerce secretary under Barack, and then just the network of folks that can help raise funds in order to make sure that they're able to get their message out across the country.
Obviously, if the governor were put on a ticket, it would have an impact here. I mean, he's the governor. If he's vice president, he's not the governor anymore. That's a big impact here. But as you look at the big picture, and of course the big picture for Democrats, for delegates, is you want to win.
Yes.
Does the VP matter in the scope of things to you?
I think it does, and I know that there's a list of potential VP candidates that are being floated around. I have not today looked at whether or not JB has received documents for vetting. I know that it was rumored that there was about 6 or 7 candidates that had received those documents.
Yeah, he said on MSNBC Tuesday morning, this morning as we record this, that he had not been requested. Yeah. Those had not been requested.
Gotcha. So I think taking a look at the VP candidates, it's about seeing who can add value to the ticket, whether it's in the form of helping raise funds, or if it's in the form of a battle state where that person has the ability to bring out the votes in order to carry the ticket over the finish line. So those are things that all the candidates that have been proposed, I think, would make great candidates. That's one of the good things right now, is that there is a deep bench in the Democratic Party, and excited about what the future holds for the party.
So obviously, this is the part where we get to the interest of an alderman who has a giant convention coming to his city here in about 4 weeks. There have been concerns about protests. Obviously, there's the ongoing stigma about violence in the city. Is the city prepared for all of the attention, all of the people? The focus on crime from the national media and certainly from the right. Are you all ready for this in a few weeks?
Yes, we are. And, if the city were taking this endeavor alone, I'd be a little bit more concerned. But given the fact that this is a national convention, you're going to have the federal government, state government, local government, other municipalities that are chipping in. I mean, the city of Chicago Police Department sent some assets up to Milwaukee in order to make sure that convention was done and successful. And so I suspect that we'll get those same assets back here in Chicago. There's going to be a whole host of public safety options for the city. And people are going to protest, and we've set up perimeters for folks to protest and exercise their First Amendment rights. And then if there's folks that don't want to abide by that, then the police department, law enforcement will step in and handle that situation. But I suspect that we're going to have a great convention. Tons of people that are coming to the city, some of them for the first time ever. I'm excited about putting our best foot forward, so that way, while they're here, they're talking about coming back with their family and spending money here in Chicago and in Illinois. So I'm excited about this convention. I've talked to some of my colleagues throughout the country. I sit on a couple of national boards, and they're excited about coming to the city. They always talk about how great the city is, especially in the summertime. And I suspect that they'll have that same experience when they're here in August.
Do you think that the focus on crime and the maybe frustrations that people have with the mayor, who has certainly seen in over his head in the year or so that he's been in office, does any of that bleed over? Obviously the conservative media is going to try and make Chicago look like this hellhole wasteland, but do any of those struggles, do you think those permeate at all? Do you think that's something that even breaks through at all?
Well, listen, we're like every big city. We have some issues with public safety. I think the issue that we've had over the last few years has been the lack of accountability. And so I think with the election of a new state's attorney in November, moving forward, we'll see a lot more accountability and consequences. What you've seen is, people on electronic monitoring. You have people that have been convicted of murder that are on electronic monitoring devices, which is just blows my mind. And so I think with a new state's attorney, you'll see more of an emphasis on making sure there's consequences, public safety being addressed, and the making sure that CPD has a good partner. People think the police department are locking people up, and they are. The problem is that under state statute, it's only for 48 hours, and then the state's attorney has to make a decision whether or not they're going to prosecute. And unfortunately, the state's attorney that we have in place right now has refused to prosecute a lot of crimes that a lot more moderate, pragmatic folks would prosecute. And so, with the new election of a prosecutor, state's attorney, I feel that we'll be trending in the right direction moving forward.
I do want to ask you about transit real quick before I let you go. Obviously, there's a huge funding cliff for CTA, Metra, RTA in general, PACE. They want a lot of money from the state, which doesn't really exist at the moment. There's a ton of concern about the work that Dorval Carter is doing running CTA. There are a lot of people who just are ignoring CTA at this point because of its unreliability and every train car smelling like urine, essentially at this point. Not to be flip about it, but it's, there are serious concerns about safety too. And how much reform is needed before you, as someone who's in a government body, so before the city does anything, before you want the state to do anything, how much reform is needed before you all can say, all right, now we know what we need to make this right?
Well, I think that there needs to be a serious discussion about whether or not government is going to truly invest in public transportation. What we've seen is that you look at Dorval Carter, his experience, his resume is phenomenal. Someone who worked at the federal level, worked at CTA for years. And I think that there hasn't been the necessary funding in order to put forward a reliable system. And so we're not getting enough funding from the feds. We're not getting enough money from the state. And I think the CTA needs to take a look at potentially figuring out whether or not they're going to make some efforts to chip in by either making some efficiencies or raising fares in order to offset, while we've seen other government entities haven't put forward enough money to deal with the operations. And so I've had some discussions with President Carter, and he's looking for a partner in the state and the federal government. And I think the federal government the government needs to take a look at itself and say, are we going to invest in public transportation or not? And put forward a plan. And then once we have those investments, then it's fair to measure whether it's successful or not. But right now, CTA has been inadequately funded from the federal level, the state level, and at the local level. And so we just have to have that discussion around what we're going to do with public transportation. There's been a big emphasis and around, the public transportation system, getting cars off the roads and environment issues. But again, if we're not putting the necessary resource or strategy at all levels of government on the table to have a serious discussion around this, all we're going to do is just create another government entity that really is going to put the city of Chicago at a disadvantage, because we'll be one of the systems within a larger organization where we have a lot more flexibility now. And so I'm a proponent of making sure that CTA stays in its place and having a discussion around what the investments are, and then hearing from the new president and their Secretary of Transportation, the governor and his Secretary of Transportation, Cook County and their Department of Transportation, and then at the city level, figuring out what we're going to do around this issue.
Alderman Viegas. Alderman, we appreciate the time. You kind of squeezed us in a little bit today, so I appreciate you doing that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Good luck over the next month with convention, and maybe we'll see you down there next month.
You got it. Thank you, Patrick.
All right. Thanks to Alderman Viegas for his time. I really appreciate his conversation. And of course, thanks to Rick Pearson from the Chicago Tribune for his reporting, his expertise as well on how all of this is affecting Governor Pritzker and Illinois Democrats. The Democratic National Convention still about 4 weeks away. State fairs the week before that. So a lot going on in our political world. We'll continue to keep an eye out on that and keep you updated. Subscribe to a newsletter at theillinoise.com, and we'd love to have you there as well. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time on The Illinoise.